going to be talking about decolonizing climate. So we know that climate justice must be at the heart of any effort to tackle the climate crisis. But the terms through which we define and demand climate justice requires, I believe, a decolonization of the climate crisis. In this very short video, I'm going to be discussing three questions. Firstly, I'm going to ask what is meant by decolonizing climate. I'm going to then ask why might this be important? And finally, I'm going to suggest a few ways in which we might be able to take some steps towards the decolonization of the climate crisis, as well as for making substantive demands for climate justice. So let me begin by asking what is meant by decolonizing climate. Now, the era of colonial domination might be long over, yet the forms of knowledge that colonial rule was predicated upon, political, economic, ecological, social, and associated ideas of progress, modernity, development, growth, wealth, and so on, are well and truly amongst us even today. Decolonization is then not a moment in time when, for instance, the former colonies of the British Empire became independent post-colonial states. Rather, decolonization is a process that requires a radical rethinking of the dominant ideas and political economic structures that continue to regulate the entire world. So why is it important? I would argue that we do not have any hope of checking the climate crisis or taking any substantive steps towards climate justice if we don't, first and foremost, decolonize climate. After all, the current planetary crisis has been caused by a toxic combination of colonialism and unchecked extractive capitalism, by which I mean the history and politics of imperial structures of domination premised upon racist ideas of civilizational superiority and an exploitative and unjust economic capitalist system that is geared towards the enrichment of the elite is what has led us to this moment of the climate emergency. To escape it, or rather to try to escape it, we need to begin by rethinking all these systems, these foundationally colonial systems that have brought us to this pass. So how do we decolonize the climate? Now, the problem with decolonizing climate that there isn't an easy three-step way out. There is no neat United Nations endorsed charter on decolonization that can quite simply just get us to a place that we might then say that we've actually decolonized the climate crisis. For what decolonization requires is a fundamental reckoning with and reimagination of the world, one that is undertaken by all of us as individuals, but also by communities, states, and institutions of all sorts, from the space of the university to large international organizations such as the UNFCCC. It requires that we are all aware of this deeply problematic history and the political and economic institutions that not only guide how we live and act, but also how we think and dream. It requires not just an awareness of our privilege, be it of race, class, gender, caste, community, age, location, and so on, but it also requires the radical political work of making structural and material changes in favor of those who are less privileged. This is, in other words, long-term, slow, uncomfortable, and laborious. Do we, given the crisis we're currently in, have the privilege of time and the energy required to do the hard work of decolonization? I would say emphatically, yes, we do, and we must decolonize climate change. As I said, I'm not going to give a step-by-step manual on decolonizing in this very brief video, simply because that requires a simplification of the political task before us, a simplification that I don't think is possible in this short period, but also one that I think would do some violence to this really powerful and important task that we have of decolonization. What I will instead offer is one simple, but I hope important suggestion, one that is particularly pertinent for the mock COP as well as for the upcoming supposedly real COP in 2021. This is my suggestion. My suggestion is that we need to listen to different voices, especially those who don't speak the same languages as we do. By language, I don't just mean French or English or German, though I am also asking for greater linguistic diversity at every stage of discussions on climate change. But what I really mean is to listen and give a seat at the table to those who are speaking of environmental destruction, wildlife extinction, planetary crisis, the climate emergency, but just not in precisely this language. Remember that language and the terms through which we apprehend and describe the world, supposedly in the categories of a universalized, rationalized Western science, is also a product of colonialism. Just to be clear, I'm not saying climate science is not important or only Western, not for a moment. Science is vital, and we need it now more than ever to understand climate change. Nor is science merely a preserve of the West, for the rest of the world has deep and powerful scientific traditions that have, in fact, been central to the shaping of something that we call science today. What I am saying, though, is that many people, including those who are living with the most damaging effects of climate change already, do not speak in the same manner. They do not deploy the same terms, categories, idioms, and the same language that neatly fits in with the scientific discourse on what climate change is. That does not mean that these knowledge systems are any less vital. In fact, as I've tried to show with my own ethnographic research with the residents of the Indian Himalaya, there are many evocative and penetrating analyses of the climate crisis that these communities, living in places that are too often sidelined at the international stage, have to offer. It is vital for the world, for the present and the future, to seriously listen to these accounts, to understand them, and incorporate them in any and all climate action. I think of this as the task of the climate translator. All of us need to become climate translators. We need to translate across languages and ways of comprehending the world. We need to seriously consider all perspectives, but especially of those who have been historically denied a say in the weighty matter of the future of the planet. So, to sum up, what I'm basically saying is that for climate justice to be truly meaningfully just, it needs to decolonize. It must decolonize. Decolonization was not a moment in history. It is not a thing that can somehow just magically be brought into life. Rather, it is a difficult and a vital process that must be made central to any thinking and any action on climate change.